Good morning. Good morning. I just learned a lot about my state and yours, and want to commend all of you. What a great group and large group. Welcome to Charlotte. Spend all of the money you have and then some. Our banks will appreciate that. And love a crowd that leads with dirty water on the table to the left of the speaker. That's a nice touch. And I would also share with you about this basketball thing. Let's just get this one out of the way. I have two sons, 13 and 14, and this is no lie. I'm a Tar Heel. The first two words they could ever speak together were Duke sucks. Can we agree? That's the bond I feel to my friends from Kentucky. And I have to add to that I live on a cul-de-sac, and a neighbor of mine happens to be Vince Calipari. And so every morning and every evening and every time I leave or come back into the neighborhood, I see UK flags there. And I will tell you, I don't know John Calipari personally, but if he is anything like his father, talk about a prince of a gentleman, Vince is the kind of guy who, when a leaf is falling, he catches it before it hits the yard, and he is just a super neighbor to have, and nice to have that Kentucky connection in the neighborhood. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you kind of an overview of the state of Charlotte's economic development. You had a great introduction, I understand, and saw on social media from Mayor Clodfelter last night, and hopefully it won't be too redundant with what you can hear from him and from others. I would begin and reference a book that you may or may not be familiar with. Dixie Rising, now 15 or 20 years old, an author from Atlanta, wrote about the South, and the premise was that Southern culture is permeating U.S. culture. Think country music, think the spread of NASCAR. He talks about the literal spread of kudzu that's moving north and south, northwest. But in talking about Charlotte, there's a great passage in there where he quotes a former banker in Charlotte as describing us in the 1960s as Charlotte is the kind of place that if the Russians launch a nuclear strike on the U.S., that if Charlotte is not included in the first wave, that we would be very disappointed. Charlotte is the kind of place that would rather be incinerated than seen small time. And for all of the numbers and the stories that you're going to hear over the next couple of days, keep that intangible in mind. It is in our civic DNA that we want to play in the big leagues. And that's hopefully a theme that you'll see here and with others that you talk to. As we look at the first decade, I'm not going to go too far back in history here, and hopefully I won't click. Well, I did click one too many. Charlotte historically, over the last 50 years, has grown at about 2.5% annually. In the first decade of the new century, that growth jumped up above 3%, one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the United States. That population growth is coming from three primary sources. The macro trend of population moving from the Northeast into the Midwest. We get our fair share, maybe a little bit more because of our favorable geographic position on the East Coast. We see young people graduating from colleges and universities up and down the East Coast. When I was at Chapel Hill in the late 80s, the bright business majors, law students, accountants, they weren't headed to Charlotte. They were looking at New York, Philadelphia, D.C., Atlanta. Today, Charlotte would be on their list. My guess is maybe some of the schools in Kentucky, young kids are looking at the jobs of Charlotte when it's time to graduate. The third source would be what the demographers call the halfbacks. We're not talking football here. The halfbacks are the folks that moved to Florida. They get hit by the second or third hurricane, don't want to go all the way back to Cleveland. And oftentimes we'll end up in the Carolinas, maybe on the coast, maybe in the mountains if they want to be in a large metropolitan area. Here they come to Charlotte. Florida is a major source of population growth for us. And then there's the reverse migration of the African American population. You may know that from World War I to 1970, about 6 million African Americans left the South for the jobs in the Northeast, the Midwest, the West Coast. Today, African American professional families are moving back to the Sun Belt. Atlanta, Dallas, and Charlotte are the top three destinations for that. And in fact, you can see the numbers here that the population growth of the first decade was not driven by growth in the white population, but in fact the diversity of the African American population, almost 50%, the Latin American and Asian populations exploding. I'll just share an aside here. The diversity you see in these numbers continues. It will continue going forward. For us as a Chamber of Commerce that purports to represent the economy, we spend a lot of time talking about and delivering on diversity and inclusiveness programming. And the reason is that we believe that if we don't relate to and understand the growing diversity in our population, we're not going to be relevant at some point in the future. And again, we think the numbers tell the story. Don't know how much time you've spent yet on light rail, but I'm pretty sure you're going to spend some time talking about light rail on your visit. In 1998, we passed a half-cent sales tax for transit that has helped to build a 9-mile stretch of light rail from the Central Business District south. We have a $1 billion extension of that under construction to UNC Charlotte, which is to the northeast of the Central Business District. We have a vision to build it out in 6 different corridors. The half-cent sales tax is not going to be enough. We have a choice facing us of what additional funding can we bring to the table, what will our priorities be in building it out. What I would leave with you and ask you as you look at this subject further, keep in mind it is not just a transit plan. Very important to note, Charlotte was one of the first communities anywhere in North America to combine transit with land use planning. From the very beginning, the development community was engaged, the planners from the public sector were engaged, and it wasn't just let's build a rail line, it was let's also put in place the transit-oriented development planning and zoning policies that will help encourage development tax base to occur along those corridors. And the whole idea is that as Mecklenburg County, the central county of this urban region, builds out, we don't have a lot of land available. If Mecklenburg is going to grow, we're going to have to do it through densification along those corridors. And you can see it just south of here to the south end neighborhood, and along that 9-mile stretch, there's been about $3 billion in new development to occur over the last 10 years as a result of the investment in transit. Charlotte, in the first decade of the new century, grew into the second largest banking center, and banking is clearly a key part of the story. Not the largest employer, but about 55,000 jobs in banking. We became the second largest banking center as Bank of America grew at one time into the largest bank in the country. Wachovia was the 4th largest bank in the country. In 2008, Bank of America purchased Merrill Lynch. Wachovia was purchased by Wells Fargo, so we've lost the headquarters of Wachovia to San Francisco, but with Bank of America's purchase of Merrill, we are still smaller than New York, but larger than San Francisco in terms of assets controlled, and again, about 55,000 jobs in banking. No industry brings more wealth, no industry has a higher payroll than banking in our economy. Why do people want to be in Charlotte? The simple answer, there are 3 reasons. I've touched on population. Population represents workforce. We have a large metro area of 2 million plus. We're growing. The population is skilled. The population is increasingly young, increasingly diverse. I haven't shown you a slide, but we have a cost of living that's 93, 94% of the national average. Those are the first 2 reasons. The third reason, and the crown jewel of our economic development profile, is the Charlotte Airport. We are now the 16th largest city in the United States. Our airport is the 7th or 8th busiest in the country. The 2nd largest hub to the largest airline in the world with the merged U.S. Airways and American Airlines. You can get to virtually any major North American destination with daily direct service. As a financial center, New York City is important to us. Anybody have a guess how many daily direct flights to the 3 major airports in New York? Would you have a guess? 52 daily direct flights. You can leave here, say I need to be in New York in 2 hours, and you can get there from here. And We have daily direct service to most of the major European destinations. Now you can get to Brazil. The only place we can't get to direct virtually is Asia. But as part of the American network now, if we can't get there direct, we're one stop to virtually anywhere in the American network, which is global. And so the airport allows us to play at a level way above our population size, and it is a critical part of the story. UNC Charlotte, higher education has not historically been a driver of our economy. UNC Charlotte is one of 16 campuses, part of the greater University of North Carolina system. You're familiar with UNC Chapel Hill, North Carolina State, that are flagship universities. UNC Charlotte, much younger, only became a university in the 60s, only got into the PhD level granting business about 10 years ago. 25,000 students, room to grow. It is a story of potential. A teenager, if you will, in the life of universities. Began PhD level research 10 years ago. Today, graduating about 100 PhDs a year. These are not PhDs in political science, philosophy, and English. They're graduating with degrees in metrology, optoelectronics, other disciplines that will find their way into the economy through patents that get applied for, spin-outs that come out of the laboratories, and technology that gets applied within existing industries. And I believe that if you come back in another 20 years, UNC Charlotte is going to stand alongside the airport as an economic driver. And you all have seen it in Austin and Boston and other places that you've been. The regions in America that create the most and the highest paying jobs also happen to be those with the most PhD level research being conducted in their universities. A lot of potential at UNC Charlotte. Foreign-owned firms continue to be a critical part of the story, almost 1,000 now, and the growth there has been significant over the last decade, more from Germany, the UK, than any others. We are very active on our team of economic developers. We have a young man who's a native of Munich, is in Europe regularly, recently in Hungary, Austria, and Germany. Jeff Edge, my colleague, will probably talk more about that in your next session. We have a young woman who's a native of Shanghai, speaks Mandarin. We're in Asia on a regular basis. You can see, I believe the number for China, I'm looking at it sideways, is 32. That number has doubled in the last 5 years. And we think it's the growth from China, foreign direct investment, is going to be exponential into the U.S. And we want to be poised to bring as much of that business and more to Charlotte and to the Charlotte region. The Central Business District is a critical part of the story. I graduated from high school in 1982. I can promise you that anybody who was downtown, uptown, Central Business District, we're a little schizophrenic on what we want to call it, but anybody who was here after dark was up to no good. If you had never seen a prostitute or never seen a drug dealer, you'd go to Trade and Tryon, our square, and it was not a pretty sight. And yet, led by Hugh McCall, the former CEO of Bank of America, in building what was then NCNB into what became Bank of America, Mr. McCall and other leaders understood that you had to have more than a job. You had to have a place where people would want to live. As he knew, he needed to recruit talent from New York and San Francisco and London and Hong Kong and elsewhere. People were going to want to have to live in Charlotte. And so the effort to revitalize some inner city residential neighborhoods, the effort to build more office space, the effort to bring professional sports facilities, the effort to bring first-class cultural facilities, really all part of a jobs recruitment mindset and mentality, and how great it is today to see 15,000 plus people living in the Central Business District. That number is exploding. Young people do not want to live in the suburbs. They want to live in the urban core. We have companies that are in the suburbs in trying to hire IT talent. All of their talent wants to live in the Central Business District, and now those companies are trying to figure out maybe they're going to have to put the jobs here as well. But you walk the streets, y'all did it last night, perhaps you'll do it the next couple of nights at 10 o'clock. You can see people pushing baby strollers, walking dogs on their way to the bars, out in the park. at baseball games now. It's a wonderful sight to see, and it was not the case just 20 or 30 short years ago. As the recession hit in 2008, it was a recession led by a credit crisis, and certainly we took it on the chops regarding our banking industry, and we felt it in many ways. And yet Charlotte was fortunate. We continued to attract companies, continue to be a destination for companies and for businesses. Just a few logos here of the kinds of companies, a diversity of corporate headquarters, manufacturing operations, financial services, others that came. I'll just single out Chiquita here, which came from Cincinnati. The story was one of contracting air service in Cincinnati with growing international destinations, in particular at the Charlotte airport. It was also one of workforce. Chiquita needs Spanish-speaking professionals. They were having a tough time in Cincinnati recruiting that talent. They were looking at South Florida. They were looking at Charlotte. Under the category better to be lucky than good, they came to visit us one summer week when we happened to be hosting a couple of soccer matches one night in our NFL stadium. The national team from Cuba, Costa Rica, Mexico, and El Salvador were in town, and on a stormy summer night, there were 40,000 soccer fans, most of whom were Spanish-speaking professionals, and it helped to seal the deal for Chiquita to determine that they could find the talent that they needed. I mentioned the arts. In the teeth of the recession, we finished on time, on budget, a collection of 3 new museums, renovation of a few others, what we call the Levine Cultural Campus, just less than 1 block from here. Folks, yes, professional sports help in the recruitment of companies and corporate headquarters. So do cultural and artistic facilities. And Jeff can tell you that particularly companies from Europe, they may not know a lot about Charlotte. And what we invest in our cultural facilities says a lot to them. And if you had a chance, just even 30 minutes to visit any one of those cultural facilities, the Beckler Museum of Modern Art, it's largely a European collection. Top-rate architecture, top-rate collection. Great assets for the citizens of this region to enjoy. Phenomenal assets for us to show our visitors, our guests, our prospects as we're trying to convince them to make Charlotte home. NASCAR Hall of Fame. We've made a play in the last decade to become more of a tourist destination. Charlotte is a place where people come to do business, not necessarily to bring their families. And yet now the NASCAR Hall of Fame, an anchor to the NASCAR industry that is unofficially headquartered in Charlotte with the Charlotte Motor Speedway, just across the Mecklenburg County border in Cabarrus County. Now the NASCAR Hall of Fame, which is an anchor to not just the NASCAR industry and for fans, but it's part of our convention center with a large ballroom space that talk to our hoteliers. It really helps us in selling conventions and meetings. In coming to Charlotte, literally puts the heads in beds that are such a part of the tourist business. And just 1 month ago, we opened up BB&T Ballpark, the new home to our Charlotte Knights AAA baseball stadium that for the last 20 years has been playing out in Fort Mill, just across the border in South Carolina. Now back in the Central Business District, incredible skyline views of Charlotte. Nobody's watching the ball games. They're sitting there gawking at the beautiful skyline views. And we're an affiliate of the Chicago White Sox. And a rounding out of the sports calendar with the NBA, formerly the Bobcats, soon to be again the Hornets, and of course the NFL Panthers. We're getting asked a lot, is this stadium expandable to major league size? It is not. The site it's on is very tight, very small, and we're okay with that. We think that with the NFL and NBA here, AAA baseball is a nice price point below that. The corporate sports dollar is already spread pretty thin. They're selling out most of their games. I was there a couple Saturday nights ago. They turned away 200 people, and that's a nice position to be in. It seats about 10,000 and a great facility. The energy sector is a key part of the story. As the banks hit the skids in 2008, Duke Energy stepped up and said we can emerge in attracting energy jobs, and in fact we went from about 20,000 jobs in energy today to about 25,000 with announcements from companies like those you see here, anchored by Duke Energy, and it's expertise in fossil and nuclear, also aided by the band of talent from Virginia Tech to the north, Georgia Tech to the south, engineering schools at NC State, Clemson, our own UNC Charlotte companies are attracted to that talent into Charlotte for the other reasons that I had mentioned. Our largest employer by industry segment is healthcare. 90,000 people employed in healthcare. We don't talk about ourselves as a healthcare center. That may not even be on your agenda, probably because we don't have a medical school here, and yet we are home to the Carolinas healthcare system, the second largest nonprofit hospital system in the country behind the Veterans Administration. We're also home to Novant Health, a competing hospital network. The two compete like hell each day to put each other out of business. The result is they both produce very high quality, very cost-effective health care that we all enjoy in this marketplace. And we think there's a lot of opportunity to grow healthcare jobs in this market. I may have said 90,000 jobs versus 55,000 in banking, 25,000 in the energy sector. The Democrat National Convention in 2012 was an unprecedented opportunity to tell our story. A convention is a one-week event. It does not transform your economy in any structural, long-term way. If you're thinking about hosting a convention, don't do it for that reason. It is an opportunity to tell your story, and we were perhaps lucky. Tampa, the week before, hosting the Republicans, had a hurricane come through that was a bit disruptive. They had Clint Eastwood get up there talking to that chair, which made it all less than a positive experience. The Democrats came to Charlotte. The media were bored. Barack Obama was going to be reelected. Big deal. There was no political story. For 2.5 days, the media were just desperate to be served up any good stories. And we were able to give them one story after another, show them what's happening in our energy sector, healthcare, what's happening in higher ed. Myself, my chairs, others, we got one opportunity after another to go live on CNN and Fox News and CNBC. And a little secret to that is it's really cool when you get to go live. And not often do you get to do it. When you go live, it really doesn't matter what they ask you. You can say whatever you want to say. What are they going to do? Cut you off? So they can ask you if the sky is blue, and you can start talking about the Charlotte airport and all the flights they have throughout North America. And so it was a great opportunity for us. 2013 was our second best year ever for job announcements. We kicked off the year with MetLife announcing 1,300 jobs. Financial services related. Great story. MetLife looking to consolidate operations from the Northeast, Midwest, New England, wanting to reduce their costs. They could here. They also look at the coastal cities of the Northeast and New England, having been through Hurricane Sandy, and they see a lot of expensive infrastructure that's going to be very expensive to replace in the coming years and decades. They were looking for places like Charlotte. They also put 1,300 jobs in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, in large part because of the new infrastructure and the more stable weather that we see here. Interesting on their part. And we ended the year with Electrolux, a great story, a company that 5 years ago relocated its North American headquarters from Augusta, Georgia to Charlotte, 800 jobs. Announced in December of 2013, they're going to double that from 800 to 1,600. They're going to build an $85 million building. And again, a great story of a company that hasn't been here long that's already doubling down on Charlotte's future. So you're not surprised to see, and I'm going to jump ahead to some closer numbers. We have a new research guy at the Chamber, and he and I are having a little debate about the growth. I'll reference Mayor Clodfelter last night. Told you that since you were here 20 years ago, Charlotte has doubled. We're a metropolitan population today of roughly 2 million people. I would predict that you come back again in 20 years and we invite you back at least that often and more frequently if you feel the need. We're going to be 4.5 million people in 20 years. And you can see some of the cities that compare today in size to that. If you look at Atlanta today is 5.5 million or so. We're 30 or 40 years behind Atlanta, but we're tracking that kind of growth. And so from the Chamber of Commerce perspective, and relevant perhaps to your purpose of being here, when you're talking about that kind of growth, we have two views of that. One is very, very positive. There's tremendous opportunity, tremendous wealth, a lot of jobs to be created in that kind of growth, and that's a good thing, and we're all about that. There are also challenges to that kind of growth. Are we building the public infrastructure that we need to keep up with that growth. In transportation in particular, are we going to be able to move people and product in and through this region like we can today in a way that's attractive? And so if you look at the Charlotte Chamber's legislative agenda, for example, if out of 10 items, 5 or 6 are related to higher education in our public schools, 3 or 4 are going to be related to transportation. How do we fund our investment in transit? How do we build roads that we need throughout the region? How do we continue to grow our airport? So we're focused again on the positive opportunities of growth as well as the challenges. The buildings you see on this rendering, as I conclude, some of these are real, some are imagined. Don't know how we're going to fly you around in those jets, but with drone technology building, we think we can handle that. Thank you for the opportunity to share this with you, and I hope the rest of your visit is a wonderful one. And again, we're flattered that you would come to Charlotte to learn from us. You've got a great agenda ahead of you. Thank you, and have a great day.